Bring in Dan Close, the head of municipals over at Nuveen. Dan, thank you very much for being here. Now, we always talk about general obligation revenue. This is a true revenue kind of bond situation developing. What exactly are sales tax bonds, and why are muni investors keying more on them these days?
Thanks for having me on the exchange, Tom. I always love coming back here and talking munis. So when you're going to the mall on Black Friday, you're going in and buying on Cyber Monday, and you're swiping your credit card to buy the new, blender, you're really going in to support roads and bridges, and schools and parks and libraries. And that's because every time you're buying something, I'm buying something, it generates sales tax revenues. And municipalities leverage these income streams to go in and build large infrastructure projects. So we see states, this is a hugely important income component for states. It's about a third of their revenues. And we see it's a large component for local governments, too, because they often use these sales tax bonds to leverage public infrastructure. So if you have mass transit, if you have local infrastructure with mass transit, you tend to see more sales tax structures.
I mean, in the New York area, we're very aware of this because we talk about this idea that the incoming mayoral administration in New York is talking about things like free mass transit and whatnot. But there is a difference here. When it comes to sales tax bonds, not every state is the same.
That's right.
In fact, some states don't even charge sales tax. I used to live in one of them. I used to live in New Hampshire. It was live free or die. You didn't pay sales tax. But how exactly then do investors kind of understand the differences in how these bonds function and what jurisdictions are the most effective in?
Yeah, there's 5 states. You listed one of them with New Hampshire, Delaware, Oregon, also Montana. None of these have sales taxes. And so you have anywhere from 0% sales taxes to 6% and above. And what we find is if you have a state that doesn't have an income tax, like Florida, like Tennessee, you tend to be in that bucket of the 6% and higher sales taxes. So for states, we see that they generally try to leverage these for infrastructure projects. We tend to see about a 7.5% rate when you take the sales tax for states and local governments together. But they're just really important for those states, especially that don't have income taxes, to use them to leverage for other purposes to keep government running.
And how exactly, as a portfolio manager, do you go about picking these sales tax type bonds for a portfolio?
Yeah, they're yielding a lot more than your general obligation bonds, but we look for primarily 3 things. One, from a legal perspective, we look for minimum debt service coverage to make sure that there's enough sales taxes to cover principal and interest when due, and also to make sure that municipalities aren't over leveraging this with additional bonds tests. We look at resiliency. So we'll look back to how these bonds did during COVID, how the bonds did during the GFC. And then we'll also look as well as to how broad the tax pledge is. So if you have a state that has every single service, every single point of sale taxed, it's a much broader tax, and those are a lot safer versus narrow taxes like in Ohio, there's a state liquor tax, and that liquor tax is very narrow. So we need more over collateralization to really account for the greater variability.